Hi, good evening, and welcome to AG Talks. My name is Rhoda, and I'm the guest host here for this program that allows you to have the opportunity to speak to the Attorney General of Trinidad and Tobago. Good evening.
Good evening, folks. We got News Source live and direct. It was a big coup, so we're so interested, Rhoda. Thanks for being the host this week. You are live, direct, targeted, and we could think of nobody else that we'd want this week to ask all the questions that everybody else wants to have asked and to just have unscripted answers. So thrilled to have you here with us.
I am honored, very honored. And of course, I have to bring greetings from Vonnet. There is no way I could be here and not bring greetings from Vonnet to
The
you.
mighty V.
Yes,
That's all I have to say.
The mighty V.
Excuse me for a moment, huh? Buonasera, Trinidad and Tobago. Just congratulations on football today. What a great match. It was awesome. So still celebrating.
Somebody is very happy about that victory this afternoon.
I have to confess. Big fan of the English in terms of the work that we do together. Respect to Harriet Cross, the British High Commissioner, and her predecessors, but quite happy for the victory this evening for Italy.
Yeah, when you came in here, you were very, very, very pumped and hyped. And I don't think it was just spin.
It wasn't.
I don't think it was just spin. I think that football game had a lot to do with it. So, AG, we're going to get into it. You ready?
Ready to go.
I like the combination of colors, the black, the white, the gray.
I got the endorsement there, folks. So.
Yes. Because I feel like it will help us to look at the black, the white, and the gray of law, right?
Oh, okay.
Right, so here it goes. You're both the Attorney General and the MP for San Fernando West. The Attorney General is the other person that makes it possible for us to have a cabinet and constitute a government here. As MP and as Attorney General, how do you navigate two positions? One where you have to be the advisor for the cabinet, something that I think needs impartiality, and then you're also an MP, so something that requires party adherence in a sense. How are you navigating those two strata?
Well, the two are quite complementary in many ways. The Attorney General gets the ability not only to advise cabinet, but the privilege to make law. And if you look at some of the large issues facing any constituency, apart from economic opportunity, there's crime. There is quality of life that is associated to that. So having the ability to do the transformative work starts and stops in San Fernando West, but ripples everywhere else. So there's a certain amount of compliment that goes with it. I have to tell you that the most refreshing reset that you can ever get is the time that you spend in your constituency. For me, usually with a clipboard and a drain, walking house to house, I found it important to be out on the field and not just in the office. So I don't really see the two things as being exclusive from each other. I see them as quite complementary.
How many hours a night do you sleep?
I am not a morning person. I love my sleep and I don't sleep enough. We have a very hardworking Prime Minister, and the job of the Attorney General is to be ready for any call that happens, be it in national security, the Prime Minister's call, or emergencies. So I have to confess that probably I get a couple of hours at best, 4 to 6 hours if I'm lucky on some nights. And you're always just waiting for the phone to ring. You wake up, you crack the news the minute it's out. So at 2 o'clock, you'll open eyes in the morning, see what the newspapers have to say because you need to be attuned to what's happening. And then by 6 o'clock, depending upon who you're relating to, what country you're speaking to, it's pretty much a moving target at all points. But I need more sleep.
Has it ever occurred to you, have you ever thought that perhaps the Attorney General should be a separate office, a distinct office, like the way we've got the DPP, who's not an elected official in that sense? Have you ever thought that perhaps the office of the AG should not be an elected official?
I find that people that live in ivory towers, who have never had the privilege of walking amongst people, tend to just be disconnected. And let me give you an example. I look at some of our economists speaking about, let's go to the IMF and let's just cut expenditure and balance the budget. And I say to myself, it's all well and good to live at the university where the privilege of being an academic comes about. But when you're talking about going to the IMF and balancing the budget, what you're really saying is, whose job are you going to cut? And I keep saying to myself, we're not a company, we're a country. There's certain aspects of our country that will never be able to have full-on participation until opportunity gaps are closed. So I find that being an elected member of parliament, serving as Attorney General, means you get a real reality to what justice feels like, what it ought to become, what the reality of what you want your citizens to be. We talk about things in very esoteric ways, but really and truly, the purpose of these talks, the purpose of really carrying out the mission in law is, what is the reality that you want Trinidad and Tobago to become? Where do you see yourself now, and where do you want to be? And there's no better way than being an MP elected who can really speak from literally the ground up. You need to know what underprivileged people look like, sound like, want. You need to know what privileged people look like, sound like, and want. And you need to know how to close the gaps in terms of opportunity. And the best way is seeing it physically on the ground.
But AG, when you're making laws, you are making laws for a wide swathe of people, right? The privileged, the underprivileged, the in-between. What is the internal check and balance then that you have in place to ensure that the advice that you're going to be giving to the cabinet with respect to legislation is not, I guess, colored or impacted on by your political obligations?
Well, the first thing that I always rest very assured by is the fact that we have a robust judiciary, fiercely independent, and has stood us well. So my first checkpoint in making law and advising the cabinet is, am I within constitutionality? Will this law stand? If somebody challenged the law, will it be held to be a good law for the peace, order, and good government of Trinidad and Tobago? That's the first checkpoint. Mm-hmm. The second checkpoint is understanding, will this law be capable of being operationalized? And to operationalize law, you really have to think about your society across its points. We are a divided society in some senses. You could use the medical term of being bipolar almost, but that's not unique. You look at a number of countries around the world where there are two large ethnic groups in competition, and you understand the consequences of bipolarity in that sense. And when you hit constitutionality, you hit reality check. The next thing that you really have to do is to say, in your operationalization, point number 2, will this society be good enough if we started right now? One of the things I have observed over the 6 years of doing this job is that governments before tended to look for a perfect product as opposed to starting. And there was not a focus upon what I call the 4 consequences of performance: plant and machinery, people, processes, and law. The law is only one of the aspects of successful performance. If you don't have the plant and machinery to do it, the people and the processes to engage in it, it's just never going to happen. Whether it's a sex offenders registry, whether it is reducing the magisterial caseload, whether it is making sure that the criminal justice system works faster, you have to have these things working together to get a product.
I want to remind persons that are listening, you can add your questions to the comment thread on the live, and the questions will get to me, and I will pose them to the AG. So AG, back to the conversation we're having here. This ministry that you are currently the head of, Office of the AG and Legal Affairs, is gone through various iterations. There was a period of time when it was together, then it was apart, then it was together, then you had another ministry, Justice or something, and put together. Now it's back together, AG, LA. We've got one person who is, well, yourself, who is in charge of AG, LA. Tell me, what's the distinction between the Office of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs? What's one doing that the other is not doing?
Well, the first thing is that merging the ministries, and I've just given a report to the Parliament, has produced a massive benefit to Trinidad and Tobago. That benefit in dollar figures is equal to $2,650,000,000.
How so?
So merging legal affairs, looking at the cost of legal affairs in the period 2010 to 2015, plus the cost of the Attorney General's ministry, plus the cost of Ministry of Justice, to merge those three aspects together and put them under one minister has just in terms of dollars and cents alone resulted in $2.65 billion cheaper costs. Secondly, people missed the reality of what legal affairs was about. Legal affairs is the repository. It's what I call the golden arm of the ministry. We're blessed to have a phenomenal Registrar General and Deputy Registrars, Miss Karen Bridgewater, respect and big up to you, Nicole Muna and Francis Sandy. These are people that have served and have been waiting for the opportunity to have somebody with passion for the area. My job is to enable, to measure. You notice I'm big into data. I can tell you the data on anything that I manage. Dollars, cents, figures, numbers, how many employees you have. Legal affairs has, and for me as a corporate commercial litigation attorney with a focus on winning, not litigating, winning. Winning sometimes means litigating something to a particular point and then walking away with a success. Imagine having the control over births, deaths, every land transaction, every transaction that is recorded in terms of property, cash transactions, and then merging that with the capacity to make law. It's why the Follow the Money campaign that our government pursued came to life, because I was able to bring that skill set to the fore. If I'm going to tackle criminality, it's not only about the law. Do you have a law to treat with murderers? Do you have a law to treat with kidnappers? No, it wasn't that. I was passionate about the Al Capone experience. I will take you down for tax evasion if I can't catch you for murder, because I can follow the money with that. So the Ministry of Legal Affairs provided that opportunity with radical reforms. We're the first ministry in the Caribbean to go online with electronic payments. All of our data is now digitized. I'm talking about millions of deeds and transactions, so that this digital economy and following the money now become one and the same.
Does digitize mean available to the public?
Oh, yeah.
Like if I want to be able to search deeds, birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, that sort of thing.
Yep.
Am I now in a position to do
Yep.
that?
The last leg.
From my home?
Yep. The last leg is from your home at 2 a.m. in the morning, swiping your credit card, debit card, etc. The last leg of it is the company's reforms that we're putting in right now.
Yeah.
So basically, we have every scrap of deed digitized.
So I can pay and do these searches?
Absolutely. You can register your company online. You can file your returns online. You can register your births and deaths. That'll be completed very shortly. You can order your certificates. It'll be dropped to you. Your searches, you can type in Faris Al-Rawi in the Property Business Real Estate Solution. That's a computer program that we have at the ministry, which is accessible outside. Every deed that has my name on it, whether as an attorney at law or as a proprietor, connected to every company, it's all there.
So I can go and look for your birth certificate and your marriage certificate?
You can go and search there's certain user restrictions.
Right.
Let me explain this. We're about to use a very important shift. You know the United States has a social security number?
Yes.
Right. So we're at the cusp right now of getting to Trinidad and Tobago a unique identification number attached to your birth certificate or to your naturalization certificate if you're not born here, which will then be a key that unlocks all of your government services, so that every time you enter the system of Trinidad and Tobago, driver's license, NIS, health surcharge, you access the hospital, all of the bells start to ring, and then the connection points come together. It's going to be attached to your land ownership, your company ownership, your shares. You register a motor vehicle because you've done it. The key is to make sure that everybody is in the system for fairness and for protection as well against fraud, against theft of identity, etc. But imagine if in this country, everybody's also equally paying their fair share. Then our potholes get solved, our water delivery gets solved, our quality of life gets solved. We can reduce taxation because there's a fair distribution of concerns.
Gotcha. Well, well, you know me, I into receipts. I like to be able to back up all the things that I say with information.
Sure.
So the more information, the state makes available to me, that I mean is fair and safe to be made available to me, I'm always happy about that. I have a challenge for you from Desta Francis. She says, take 30 seconds and give us a fast list of things you have achieved. Go.
Crossed 600 laws, digitized the environment of Trinidad and Tobago, brought online digitization and payment of services, created divisions of court, the criminal division, the family division, the children division, the criminal proceedings rules, the family children's rules, the civil proceedings amendments, the electronic digitization of the courts and structures.
All right, I'm stopping you now. That's 30 seconds. But you seem like you could have gone on for a little bit longer. I have another question for you from Valerie Bowen. And this is to do with an interesting case that would have happened in the judiciary. Sodomy law struck down. Government to appeal the landmark decision. What's the decision from the Privy Council?
Great. Reason. Let's say why we're appealing, because we could have stopped there. So in the Jason Jones matter, there was a challenge to the sodomy law. And that is one of the laws that treats with discrimination. And there are actually 27 other laws just like that. People may not know it. The Cinemas Act, the Hotel Act, all of these things don't allow for certain circumstances. It was necessary in the Jason Jones matter for two reasons to appeal the decision. Number one, it is important for us to get to the highest court of the land, that's the Privy Council, so that the Privy Council can say whether they agree that the law ought to be saved or not saved. Because once they make a decision on that, we'll know what to do with the other 27 laws. So certainty of the law is one process. And in this country, we're not a theocracy, we're a democracy. There are very heartfelt views, both for and against the issue. So to avoid having to be Solomonic and cutting the child in two, it is responsible for an Attorney General to recommend an appeal in the matter so that we can settle the law. Once the law is settled, we know where we go from there.
I'm glad you say that we're not a theocracy and we are a democracy, because a lot of the attitudes towards things like, let's say, abortion rights and orientation and marriage, especially same-sex marriage, are things that are determined or influenced by religion. What is your take? What are your views on that legislation becoming very concrete, or rather the decision becoming very concrete and having to strike things down that are likely to get certain communities in the country very much up in arms and upset?
So I'm not allowed to have too much of a personal opinion, but as the Attorney General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, I must uphold the Constitution. The Constitution respects the equality of treatment in this country. The Constitution respects our democracy. The Constitution respects our right to life and to religion, etc., and freedom of expression. The Constitution also has saved laws, like the fact that you can hang somebody, which is opposed to cruel and unusual punishment. In fact, in September, the Privy Council is going to decide upon the fate of hanging in this country in many senses. So from my perspective, I need to uphold the law. And the law needs to be decided in relation to what the courts have to say our laws stand or don't stand as. So I am interested in the faster we get a judicial determination on the issue. And very importantly, that particular case also touches the saved law aspects. Can we still use the Board of Inland Revenue as saved law? Can we still use the Customs and Excise Authority as saved law? Can we still hang people under the saved law principle of Section 6 of the Constitution and do laws such as this stand? So that's why we want to get a decision out of the Privy Council, and then I will advise the government on what we must do.
Okay, I'm going to get back to that, but Candice from Twitter has a really urgent question here for you. Do you do your own laundry or do you go to a laundromat?
I am blessed with a wife who says, quote unquote, does not my work or does my work. So I am the designated dishwasher, mopper, bed maker, dog bather, etc. And my wife does the laundry. I do the packing and folding, mind you. So we divide and conquer.
It's interesting that you talked about being blessed with a wife. I want to go back to the issue that we were just looking at there, which is partly to do with sodomy law and also partly to do with rights for persons with orientation. What if persons decided that they wanted to be in a position where they could get married same sex?
That's one of the 27 laws affected by Jason Jones. That's why the Jason Jones decision from the Privy Council is so important. So the concept of marriage in the Muslim Marriage Act, the Hindu Marriage Act, the Marriage Act, which is the Christian version of it, and the Orisha Marriage Act, there are 4 marriage acts that apply. And of course, the Marriage Act you look at from the civil and religious side. So I have to look at these 4 marriage acts, which only say that a biological man, in terms of chromosome biology, and a woman can be married. So what Jason Jones treats with is one of those functions as well. So we'll have to wait on court decisions.
I hear you on that. So we're still waiting on that Privy Council decision to start to have those difficult conversations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, and you're not going to shy away from that difficult conversation?
I have never shied away from any difficult conversation, even if it's personally related.
Now, I know one of the other things that you do, or one of the other things that the ministry that you're at the helm of, the office that you're at the helm of, AGLA, makes legislation. You craft legislation. I want to ask you, using the same Marriage Act as a for example, walk me through how you get something from an idea or advice to the cabinet about legislation that should be passed to the actual passing of the legislation.
First thing we do is we take, there are multiple streams of requests for laws coming at us. So every ministry in Trinidad and Tobago will send us a request saying, listen, we want to touch the law on mining, we want to touch the law in relation to rates, we want to touch the law in relation to taxes, we want to touch crime, we want to touch guns, kidnapping, anything that you can think of comes to here. We have public health regulations. So it all comes at me. So what we've done is to distribute amongst a very incredible team of people that we've built over the last 6 years. And I'd like to tell you something, Rhoda. When I came into this ministry, every single person that I inherited in the ministry continued to work for me, unless they left. Every single person. My personal secretary was the personal secretary of the AG before me. I told the staff in this ministry, listen, the Office of the Attorney General is here to carry out and discharge functions under the Constitution. You're entitled to have your own politics. In fact, there's a head of one of my divisions who campaigned against me in San Fernando West, toe to toe. She's still the head of the division. She's an excellent person, great lawyer. I have a lot of respect for her. I noticed a little bit of unease, and I had to ask, well, what's all of this about? And the usual thing about the slash and burn of politics, I said, listen, you're entitled to carry out your politics outside of the ministry. If I'm passionate about politics, you have the right to that. But in this ministry, we are the Office of the Attorney General and Ministry of Legal Affairs. So when these laws come at us, these teams that we've built and solidified, some of them in law, I felt that one of the things that was necessary was to leave this ministry in a better place than I found it. And that required institutionalizing a lot of the offices, putting them within structure, giving them budget, giving them range and facility. So these entities help us. So we take concept ideas and then we take prescriptive ideas. And then we invite the stakeholders onto the table. I want to point out something to you. Apart from the opposition's anxiety about laws that we bring, you notice there isn't too much noise?
There isn't a lot of noise. What I do hear a lot of in the House of Representatives is not enough consultation, not enough consultation, not enough consultation.
Well, the opposite is true. Because if you look at what I do, I'm on the public field all the time. Started off with prisons, child marriage, marijuana, dangerous driving, sexual harassment, sexual offenders, voyeurism, you name it, we talk about it, murder, etc. What I have been the beneficiary of is a very scientific prime minister who likes to make sure that you do things with precision. So what we do is we invite people onto the table, which is why you don't hear the noise from any other sector except the opposition, because we usually sit at the table and craft. And another thing that I'd point out to you, I challenge you to find me ever having read a speech in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago while I'm piloting a bill. It's because we do work from first principle. In other words, then, I make sure that I draft the law myself with my team. I don't need the assistance of technocrats to my left when the committee stage comes along, because we know the law, each one of us as ministers, from first principle. The objective, if you step outside this room, there are 16 pictures on a wall. These are the 16 attorneys general that have served. I am very conscious that this is a revolving door. It will come to an end, and my mission is to facilitate reform.
Who are the rest of the persons that are on your team? Because I know it's not a one-man legislative drafting team. So what are the persons that are on this team?
So we have a very robust legislative review team, first of all. Clarence Bharath is the chair of the LRC. I can't be the author and the chair. It's too paternalistic, because my child pretty, right? My child will never be ugly or in need of fixing, right?
Of course not.
It will be a child that a mother would love, right? So Clarence Bharath is my sounding board as the chair. We have the rest of our cabinet colleagues there: Alison West, Randall Mitchell, Terence Dialsing, Stuart Young. We have a great team of us that work on legislation together. That's when I bring the baked product forward and I say, guys, give me a view. What do you think about it at this point? But the Law Reform Commission is a phenomenal entity. We stopped having law reform officers from the outside come in. We used in-house law reform so that law reform could help with the policy drafting. So Charlene Taylor-Basso has been phenomenal. We have some excellent drafters inside of that team. The Law Reform Commission has come to life. And then we've created in this ministry, head of anti-terrorism, Ms. Viana Sharma, head of the Criminal Justice Division, Mrs. Farzana Nazir Mohammed, head of civil justice in that sense, that's Tanil Ramkisoon. And then we have Solange D'Souza Ransom, who handles the PS Secretariat, Nirana Parsan, who handles the prisons and other criminal justice aspects that are more related to national security. Then we have the Registrar General. So we've dealt with a lot of teams, with some very vibrant team heads. And then I sit on each of those teams, and we just work the product as it comes to us.
If you had to make up a football side, who would be the 5 persons from the cabinet that you would pick to have on your team?
That's a hard question.
And that's from Cassie from Instagram.
A small goal team, Italy versus England team, they're different things. Sometimes you want a fast team, or you want a long haul team.
Well, Cassie wants to know who from the cabinet you will have on that football team with you.
All right, then this is not just because he's my boss, but Keith Rowley, definitely.
Okay.
Why? Because he has an appetite for hard work.
Where would you put him to play? Defense, midfield, front?
He'd make a good goalkeeper.
Okay.
Why? He has the stature to hold the fort.
Okay.
Right? So he'd be like a centre back to goalkeeper kind of thing.
A Peter Schmeichels?
Yeah, he could command that. So that's number one.
Okay.
I'd definitely be somewhere in midfield, I'd guess.
Okay.
So that's 2. I would definitely have Stuart Young on my team.
Where would you place him? Wing or attack or what?
I'd put Stuart center forward.
Okay.
Stuart is the kind of guy who would mow you down, right? Marvin Gonzalez.
Okay.
Is a boss man in terms of I'm trying to spread it out. I have so many rock star.
So you're gonna have Marvin flanking?
I'd have Marvin flanking.
Okay.
I would probably have off the field, but coordinating the play, 2 people. Clarence Bharath with a headphone set on, miking up everybody to tell it to go left or right, and Camille Robinson Regis, I'd have them there. And then my last person on the field, I think I'd probably put Shamfa Kojo.
Okay.
Because Shamfa Kojo is just a lioness. She roars.
Okay. All right. Let's get back to talking about legislation for a bit. So you talked about the passage of a bill. But what happens when that 3/5 majority eludes you? Because there has been legislation like that.
I never go to Parliament without a plan B and a plan C.
Okay.
Never. I know what I am facing in the Parliament, but I take the full version that I'd like to get so that Trinidad and Tobago is on watch as to what it can get. If you get this support, here's what we can get, here's why it can work.
But then the challenge becomes that the legislation, the Plan B and the Plan C legislation, may not necessarily have the same kind of teeth as the Plan A.
I can only pass what I can pass. So if I go with a full package and I cannot get the support for it, I'll have to cut what I can keep using a simple majority, take that forward, and then let that cheese stand alone in your face, and then constantly be the advocate for those things. Look at what we did in the Evidence Act. We took the Evidence Act and we had a very powerful thing inside of the Evidence Act.
What's
witness
that?
Anonymity.
Right.
We didn't only want to use computer evidence and CCTV evidence and simplify procedures to make sure that evidence is safer. We didn't only want to make sure that you didn't have to turn up into court and walk with all the equipment and bring the 2,000 bags of marijuana that you found. You could take pictures, etc. But what we said is vulnerable witnesses who are at risk of dying, who are afraid to give evidence, that they ought to have the court's permission in very special circumstances to give evidence anonymously, which exists all over the Commonwealth: England, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, Canada, the United States. But in Trinidad and Tobago, there's a young man named Saddam Hussein who says, we can't have that. And therefore, we had to take off witness anonymity and put it on its standalone. And now is where we have to beat the tune on that drum and ask Trinidad and Tobago, do you want witnesses' lives to matter? What's your view, Trinidad and Tobago? What's the Trinidad and Tobago that you want? You see, we look at the United States shows. We look at the FBI listening on equipment, surveilling people, breaking down a door to get in, but not in Trinidad and Tobago. No, prisoners who are in a jail cell communicating with other criminals outside of jail, they have rights. And according to Mr. Saddam Hussein and the United National Congress, prisoners' rights are not to be infected by bugging. So when we took the Interception of Communications Act forward, because we left the ability for prisoners' evidence that was bugged to the discretion of the court, we passed it with a simple majority. But the only people telling Trinidad and Tobago, don't bug a prison cell, was the UNC.
Does it bother you that we have people here who will in one breath complain, why aren't we more like whichever country? And, we could insert a country's name here. And then at the same time, they fight against us making changes to become like that other space that they want us to be like.
Our ministry has recently obtained a dynamite person. Her name is Renuka Sagram Singh Suklal. And if you listen to the minister in this ministry, passionate, pounding. I was so proud of her contribution the other day on the motion of privilege against Anil Roberts, not because of Anil Roberts, but because of her passion. So she has taken this very concept that you have just spoken about and is very much lighting that issue into, number one, identifying it, having conversations about it. Because what goes on is that most people sort of don't pay attention to Parliament. Or as the politicians, they just fight in this. The newspaper editors constantly write, why don't you just kumbaya and get along, hold hands? There comes a point where, and what programs like this are intended to do, is to stop talking about personalities and start talking about issues. Are you for or against witnesses' lives? Are you for or against child marriage? Are you for or against criminalizing revenge pornography? Are you for or against the death penalty in this particular form? So having advocates that can beat the tune of the issue is what really matters. Because try as I may to ask my opponents opposite me, and I try my best to be as respectful as I can, I can't get them to commit to a point of view without it being very nebulous or something that you can't understand. The Tobago bill was an example of that. When we stood up and we said, we want Tobago to have a parliament, we want Tobago to have an attorney general, we want the Tobago to have a minister of finance, we want the Tobago authority to be an island government and not a body corporate like Awasa or TNTech. We went with specifics. Our colleagues opposite could not answer us on those specifics. All they said is more time.
I don't want you to run away from that THA self-governance bill just yet. For you, what would you say are some of the critical or most important aspects of that piece of legislation?
Absolutely. I can go back to what I just said. It is inappropriate for Tobago to not have its own legislature. It's placed to make its own laws. It has a very unique culture, and a very deep one at that. And Tobago ought to have the autonomy of legislation. It is inappropriate for the Tobago governance structure to be a municipal corporation. They ought to have a parliamentary structure. We say unicameral with independents inside of there, like senators inside of there, because it's of the size factors. Mm-hmm. We believe that Tobago ought to have a fixed budget. We say 6.8, 6.9% base minimum. That's an immediate uplift of $1.2 billion. We say that the equivalent of the chief secretary ought to be like a prime minister. We want the president to be obliged to talk to the chief secretary. We want the chief secretary to be obliged to be consulted by the cabinet. We want a cabinet for Tobago, not a Trinidad to the exclusion of Tobago position where the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago stands aside. We think an attorney general equivalent ought to be in Tobago. So we have on deck very specific provisions as to Tobago's benefit. But Tobago is being distracted by people who talk, I'm going to use a very technical term now, in gobbledygook. You can't understand what their submissions are.
Doesn't sound like a technical term for me. So as somebody who has a parent who is Tobagonian, one of the things that struck me as odd about this entire debate is when you start debating Tobago self-governance, it's in a parliament that's sitting here in Trinidad, and the majority of persons in that parliament are persons from the island of Trinidad.
Yeah.
How did your ministry ensure that it got the opinions of Tobagonians to feed into that legislation?
Because we took 25 years of discussion papers. 25 years. We took 271 years of legislation. Let's start with that. The Tobago Order in Council, if you look at that as a piece of law, 1889, we took that forward. We went through the 1980 THA Act. We went through the 1996 THA Act. We went through, Mrs. Prasad Bisesa produced a green paper in 2012. We headed to 2022. That's 10 years ago. We took all of the discussions that went in. We took the legislation that Tobago itself drafted on many occasions. We put it all together. We went back to Tobago and to Trinidad and had that discussion. And I would like to tell you this. Having spent a relatively short period of time in Parliament, 11 years, compared to what other politicians have spent, I can tell you that piece of law I'm extremely proud of. It's a good piece of law for Tobago and for Trinidad and Tobago.
Marijuana, dangerous drugs.
Yes.
Where are we at now? Because I know we've decriminalized marijuana possession up to a particular amount, a certain amount of marijuana. We're also supposed to be getting to the point where we're allowing people to be able to do research.
And commercialize it.
And commercialize it, because you did tell me when I had you on News Source
that
I will be able to have a weed cafe at some point
Cannabis
in time.
Control Bill is laid in the Parliament. It has been saved. We have settled upon the bill in a joint select committee. There is no minority report. That law is ready to come to the Parliament in September and to be passed. And you know your Attorney General has a passion for making sure that the law works as well. It's ready to be operationalized. So that will be growing, commercial exploitation, everything that you can think of that the rest of the world does is ready and set to be launched in this country.
Ben Adviel from Facebook is asking, what was the hardest bill for you to craft and why?
Wow. The Explain Your Wealth legislation probably comes top of the list. So the civil asset forfeiture Explain Your Wealth legislation is so radically powerful and had so many opponents to it and stepped on so many toes that I think that was perhaps the hardest bill to craft and to get past. Because let's face this, that catches tax evaders, that catches criminals, that catches everybody in Trinidad and Tobago who know nobody's perfect. People may have made an innocent mistake. There are lots of examples as to why this, but that one hit so hard and so far home that it was important for us to do things like make sure that people had tax amnesties so they could have an opportunity to clean their affairs, manage positions. I can tell you, we are in court in matters that are sealed, but I'll tell you a little bit about it, where we have persons who are employed in the public service, let's say earning $6,000, $8,000 a month with $50 million in assets. Massive unexplained wealth in this country. We have money laundering, etc. I can stake everything on the fact that following the money will change this society radically. And we're at the cusp of that coming to the forefront.
I hope so, because I have questions in my head about someone earning a salary of around $17,000 a month and being able to afford a Prado. So, let's hope that Explain Your Wealth answers some of those questions. Colin Sargent from Facebook is asking a question about the Equal Opportunities Commission law. He's asking, is it going to be strengthened to curb discrimination, such as verbal discrimination and online discrimination?
Okay, so Colin, thank you. Yes, but Rhoda Bharath and your massive audience and Trinidad and Tobago and the rest of the world listening, we're going on 9 years of trying to pass the cybercrime law. Inside that cybercrime law is that very concept of bullying and hate speech, which are dangerous positions to have in your law.
Extremely so. So is it that you're facing a challenge of freedom of expression? People are questioning whether you're trying to curb expression.
Well, the biggest opponent to the cybercrime law, apart from the UNC, has been the Media Association.
Right.
Understandably, the Fourth Estate needs to be sure that they will not be curtailed in any unfortunate way. But treating with Colin's question there, yes, the alternatives to our inability to pass the cybercrime law are going to come to the fore in amendments to the Industrial Relations Act, the Equal Opportunities Act, the commissions that deal with rights and balances, etc. And quite importantly, some of the cybercrime aspects that have even led to suicide, we're plugging into areas like the Sexual Offences Act. People have killed themselves over revenge pornography,
yes,
leaking of images,
and being bullied online,
twisting, etc. So what I do when I realize that the opposition will not support law, and they've made a very plain statement, they're not going to support any law. The only time that I notice that the UNC supports law, and I'm sorry to say it this way, is when they are just basically recognizing that it's going to pass anyway, or that they are cornered into supporting the law.
Yeah, and or if it's likely to benefit them. So Shanice on Twitter wants to know, what's your vice, AG?
Ooh, what's my vice? Shanice, I think this is a forum where I can't possibly come on. Vices exist in all sorts of different forms.
Yeah, but
right?
what's that one guilty pleasure you have that you must have on a regular basis?
For me, it's exercise.
I knew it was going to be that.
I can confess it, but that's not so much for the physical attributes that you get from it. It's a mental thing.
Right.
I get clinically depressed.
Right.
I believe if I don't exercise, my endorphins go way out of whack. Helps me to focus. It helps me to focus. It has nothing to do with vanity. It has to do with the fact that it helps you to clear your mind on it.
What does your exercise regime look like?
I do anything. So I'm a karate peon. I've loved martial arts for my whole life. My dad is a 6-dan black belt. My cousins, everybody in the family, we've all done martial arts. I've grown up in martial arts myself. But when I couldn't get to the dojo because of my times, I then went into weight training, running, these days spinning. It could be anything from still doing a kata every time I get the chance, to just breathing and focusing. And it's immeasurable. You have to measure it. You just have to do it.
So I want you to take a breath, and we're going to switch things up a little bit and focus on the various divisions that either fall under your office or that you have to work with. FIU. What's the nature of your relationship with the FIU? One. And the second thing is, what's the latest with respect to anti-money laundering laws?
Great. So the FIU is a division of the Ministry of Finance, and technically the Minister of Finance has line responsibility for that. However, there was an ad hoc committee that existed called the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee. I felt that was in danger of collapsing depending upon the prowess of an AG from time to time. So I took the National Anti-Money Laundering Committee and I made it an aspect of the law. I put it as a feature of the Anti-Terrorism Act that you had to have this committee. Mm-hmm. And that committee is actually chaired by the head of anti-terrorism at present, which is in the AG's office. But on that committee, we have the FIU, the Board of Inland Revenue, Securities Exchange Commission, Central Bank, Ministry of Finance, you name it, all the working, DPP's office, etc. And what we do is we focus upon the technical compliance issues of law. What are the laws we want? And the operational issues of law. And I have to tell you this, it is a rock star committee. I am so proud to be able to work with the people that work on that committee because they have done Trinidad and Tobago phenomenally well.
Who gets to, because I'm learning something here when you say to me that FIU's line minister is the Minister of Finance. Who gets to appoint a director to the FIU? Because since Suzanne Francois
Correct.
Retired?
Yes.
Right. I don't think we've appointed a director.
Correct. So the FIU TT legislation, which is an act of parliament born in 2009 when it got its substantial form, says that the director is somebody to be appointed after consultation with the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition. Mm-hmm. But it is a public service appointment. So there has to be an advertisement for the substantive head. The persons have to be nominated. When the person is nominated by the public service, then the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition are consulted, and then the appointment is made. We have an acting head right now, a phenomenal fellow. His name is Nigel Stoddard. He is acting from time to time as the head of the FIU and has done yeoman service for Trinidad and Tobago. I'm aware that the positions are to be advertised now so that that head can be filled. I spoke to the Minister of Finance on that up to Thursday of last week.
FIU, to my understanding, does a lot of data gathering. They don't actually do investigations.
They do intelligence receipts.
Right, intelligence receipts, and then they pass the information onto the FIB, right?
So they get suspicious activity reports, suspicious transaction reports from all of the entities that they have supervision over. Mm-hmm. So they have, on the one hand, you'll have the central bank, you'll have the Securities Exchange Commission as regulators in certain areas for insurance, for banks, etc., from the financial intelligence point that comes under the FIA, the Financial Institutions Act, the Central Bank Act, etc. The FIU will receive, in addition to that, non-profit organizations, real estate agents, lawyers, pawnbrokers, jewelers, car dealers, etc. It's set out in the schedule to the Proceeds of Crime Act who the FIU supervises. They receive suspicious activity reports and suspicious transaction reports. Last year, their annual report demonstrated $27 billion worth of suspicious activities.
What happens after because we hear about those reports all the time. They
send it to the Financial Investigation Branch, which is a division of the TTPS, and they send it, if necessary, with copy to the Director of Public Prosecutions. The Trinidad and Tobago Police Service investigates. You would have seen recently an issue of money laundering charges leveled against the allegations about the pastor who had millions of dollars in donations, etc.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, one is innocent until proven guilty, and I don't want to go into pretrial publicity. But that's one example where the demonetization of the $100 note prompted $28 million and then some $3 million extra, and then charges came from that. So that's an example where FIU would have received the report, And then the Financial Investigation Branch, which is a division of the police, in conjunction with the DPP, would have done their investigations and laid charges if necessary.
Explain for me, what's the nature of your relationship with the office of the DPP? And by relationship, I don't mean whether you and Mr. Gaspard are on friendly terms, but how does the office of the AG work in tandem with the office of the DPP?
So the DPP has constitutional autonomy under Section 90 of the Constitution. Prior to the 1976 Constitution, the Attorney General pretty much functioned as DPP and AG.
Ah.
So in the colonial structures...
You did the prosecuting as well?
Yes, the AG would have had functionaries to do prosecutions, but criminal law, prior to independence, etc., there was a merged office.
So you'd have drafted the legislation and then you would have also been responsible for prosecuting cases?
Yes.
Okay.
Right? So that's pre-independence, pre-republicanism. That was what the law was. We split the Constitution. Commendably. We now have the facility where a politician can be an attorney general, and in those circumstances, no politician ought to be involved in policing or certainly in prosecutions on the criminal side. Section 90 sets up the DPP as an independent entity. That person has the authority to commence prosecution, take over prosecution, or end prosecution. My relationship with the DPP is confined to administrative matters and also to acting as paymaster. What I did to tidy that up is under my tenure, I did two very important things. Number one is I provided the DPP with his own budget, line item budgets. So you'll see, I just reported to the Parliament that I spent, on behalf of the taxpayers, this ministry spent $380 million odd in legal and professional fees for a 5-year period. Mm-hmm. 180 million of that 380 was for the DPP's office alone. 122 million of that was to pay lawyers' fees left to me from Mr. Ramlogan and Mr. Nicholas, previous attorneys general. 75 million of that was spent by this office in 6 years to do 1,200 matters across 125 local lawyers and 13 foreign lawyers, earning $20 to $30 billion in return for the government. The DPP has his own line item. I cannot ask the DPP what he's doing with his money. All I can tell the taxpayers is I've spent that money at the DPP's request. The second important thing that we did as a government, there was the Anti-Corruption Investigation Bureau, the ACIB, working under an Attorney General.
But you moved that to the TTPS,
I
right?
asked the Prime Minister for that to be moved back to the TTPS.
Right, I remember
because
when
no
that happened.
politician should have a police force under his hand.
I remember when that happened and I felt that it was a useful thing.
So those are the two aspects of relationship with DPP, because ACIB does a lot of work with the DPP as well.
Okay. Central Authority.
Central Authority, I am the Central Authority of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, so established under the Mutual Assistance in Criminal Matters Act.
Well, what does it mean?
Central Authority is the centralization of all requests for assistance that Trinidad and Tobago may ask of other countries, be they Commonwealth countries or non-Commonwealth countries, and is also the authority that other countries come to when they want assistance. It does not include extradition, that's a separate matter. So if the government of the United Kingdom or the United States want assistance on a criminal matter, they come to the Attorney General. If we want assistance, we go to them. And we do this, I've just amended the law, literally up to this week gone, to allow for parity, equality between Commonwealth and non-Commonwealth countries, so that we don't have to have an actual treaty that specifically deals with mutual assistance. We can use our general treaties to give that assistance.
AG, someone just messaged me here. Remember that question we asked about your vice?
Yes.
The rumor has it that Spicy Bigfoot is your vice. Is that true, AG?
Spicy Bigfoot is one of my vices, yes.
How often are you having Spicy Bigfoot, AG?
My supplies have dried up. I couldn't
Is it like stress eating? Is it if you're having a rough day, you feel for Spicy Bigfoot?
I introduced intermittent fasting into my diet, so Spicy Bigfoot died in the intermittent fasting regime.
Okay, all right. I hear you. You and the Chief Justice, are you all on par with each other? As in are you, I guess administrative peers in that sense? How would you describe the work that you do, and how would you describe your working relationship with the judiciary?
So constitutionally, there's a separation of powers, obviously, between the parliament, which is the legislature, the executive, which is the government, and the judiciary. There is a symbiotic relationship that you have to have. And I would like to say this very publicly. This country is lucky to have Mr. Justice Ivor Archie as its Chief Justice, because Chief Justice Archie has a phenomenal logical mind for administrative matters. Apart from being an excellent jurist, and his judgments are stellar, even though I disagreed with his minority view in Barry Francis' case, right? Let's put that aside.
I don't know what that case is.
That is a case which says that Surat is not correct. So just to put that in point. But I'm teasing when I say that.
Yeah.
But Chief Justice Archie has managed to operationalize reforms like nobody else has.
And certainly in this pandemic, you've seen a lot of pivoting from the judiciary in terms of their online offering of services.
Well, let me remind you that started because the Attorney General in 2016 amended the law, and then again in 2018 to do all of that. So the pandemic came long after we had already built that out to happen.
Okay.
So we have a phenomenal relationship. A coordinating relationship, obviously at a very far distance in terms of matters, but we work on a number of committees together: criminal justice reform, civil justice reform, probate reform. As paymaster that the Attorney General's office sometimes has to do, we coordinate notes that come to cabinet for the judiciary, etc. And it has been a privilege to work with the Court of Appeal judges that we've had the pleasure to work with. Justice Lucky, who sits at the judicial education arm of the judiciary, a number of the Maria Busby Earl, Cadell,
Chief Magistrate,
who has coordinated so much work, Justice Lisa Ramsumer Hines. There are a number of strong advocates. You look at Justice Kokaram in mediation, etc. So the judiciary has had a very powerful amount of reform and position. But I have to say that our judiciary keeps within its boundaries and that there is really no overlap in any improper way. But in coordinating reforms, we work very well together.
Final burning question. Marsha from Twitter wants to know, when you do have the opportunity to fet again, what is the fet you're looking forward to the most?
Prez San Fernando.
Oh my God.
CIC fet. Those are my two big fets for the year. Shout out to Adrian Schoon for soca, one of the best fets ever. And I just love Carnival. Carnival is the best time in Trinidad and Tobago. It's a time when enterprise comes to life, music comes to life. We reclaim our country and enjoy our country in every sense of the word. Left up to me, Carnival would be a feature of a year-round facility in this country. Because, think about it, you walk anywhere in this country, lights are on, enterprise is going, music is tuning, the economy is ticking. And it really is therefore a very beautiful position for us to aspire to in terms of a constancy. Obviously, we have to have measure and balance, etc. Last thing I'd say about Carnival, it tends to be a very productive period. Despite the fact that you have people who passed out, can't make it to work, they still turn up. So you get them working hard and playing hard at the same time.
AG, if you weren't AG and you weren't a lawyer, what would you be? What else would you consider being?
I flirted with the idea of doing medicine. I did maths, physics, and chemistry for my A-levels. Applied to the Royal College of Surgeons. Got a little letter saying, yeah, we're going to interview you. And then decided, hold on, that's not what I want to do. I love construction. I'm heavy into construction and commercial enterprise. My dad is an architect and a very, very good one at that too. And my grandfather was renowned for his construction in Trinidad. So I'd probably be torn into that area. I like a challenge. There is the business of everything. There's the business of law. There's the business of medicine. There's the business of life. So I think that I'd probably say that despite the fact that my wife is really the sharp one in terms of the business park, I think I'd probably be along that line. I'm looking to the next generation right now and to sort of seam it in together.
Well, there you have it. Rhoda of News Source had a conversation with the Attorney General, Faris Al-Rawi, and we got the opportunity to find out what exactly does the AG do. So AG, I want to thank you so much for having me.
New Source came to the AG's office. Next time we're going to have a turntable and some vibes because Rhoda I'm a big fan of your show.
Thank you.
I love the fact that you ask hard questions. There are no sacred cows.
None.
None. And I love that about you and your product. So thank you for being our hostess this evening. I'd love to ask you to come unscripted and hit all the hard questions and bring it forward as we change Trinidad and Tobago into issue orientation.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And next time, if we could get some music going as well.
I'm definitely on that. Shout out to all the local artists. I'm a huge fan of a whole bunch of them. We have some of the best in the industry.
We do.
I have to tell you, a torn between Private Ryan and DJ Anna right now in terms of vibes and what we get out there. DJ Charlotte as well.
Do you listen to their the mixes that they have up on YouTube?
What do you think I cycle to? What do you think I run to? You have inspired me. So artists of Trinidad and Tobago, Major Penny, Vibes. I have to shout out as well to my partner Hoppy, who is just awesome. I mean, we have so much talent in this country.
Loads of talent.
So thank you for joining us, AG Talks. Remember, please do like and share. We'd love you to tune in to YouTube, to Facebook, to Instagram, to our podcast platforms. We ask you to stay safe. Tuesday, vaccines are coming, Trinidad and Tobago. Take your jab so we can get back to work. Everybody encourage somebody else and let's get our country back on track. Thank you so much. Thanks for being with us. We'll catch you next week.